Hello, welcome to our midweek devotion on Tuesday this week because we are celebrating a national holiday this week. It's Thanksgiving. So the question comes to us this week, what are you grateful for this year? Pastor Gary, would you care to share?
What I'm grateful for? I'm grateful for these masks because they can be used once you're done using them as a mask as something you would shoot at kids. You know,
like a slingshot.
Like a slingshot. So here I'm going to shoot this at Len. It broke, it went backwards. So I'm grateful for creativity.
Oh, nice.
I don't shoot very well though.
Oh,
I'm grateful for so many things. I'm grateful for the awareness that when this virus is done, things that I hope to never take for granted again, like going down to crooners and listening to really good music. Oh, so want that. Waiting for that. How about you?
Yeah. I have a similar thought. My sister just moved home because the rest of her semester is now going to be online. So I'm grateful that she's home and safe, although it kind of sucks for her because she doesn't get to finish her college career on campus.
How old is your sister?
21. So she's a senior at Moorhead.
Yeah.
But I got to see her this morning, so that was fun. But every time my sisters come home for the holidays, we're always like, let's go have coffee. We go to this little coffee shop in Anoka called Avant Garden, which is like a little eclectic place. Thankfully, they have not closed with the pandemic, but we're just so sad because we can't go out and have coffee right now.
My stepson is home in the same category, and if it wasn't COVID going on, you and I could set them up on a blind date.
Oh my gosh, we could have.
John's the nicest kid ever. He used to do our videoing, and your sister is too.
Yeah, totally.
So whether or not they know it, we've got a plan in the works to, we'd be relations.
The question is, are either of them going to watch this and figure out our secret plan?
Well, should we tell them to watch this? They know our secret plan, or should we just let the audience who is watching us know that you and I have a plan to do this?
I think that'll be good. Just don't tell anybody, because otherwise...
No. So you're all in on the secret for these two people that we're going to see what happens. We're going to see if love's sprinkle.
We'll see. So in addition to it being Thanksgiving this weekend, we also get to celebrate the first Sunday in the season of Advent. And I was thinking about all the themes of Advent that are so beautiful and how they're actually very real to us this year. The theme of waiting with hope, maybe impatient anticipation for the coming of Christ. Our story for this Sunday is from the Old Testament reading of Daniel, the story of Daniel in the lion's den. So I brought with me today one of my favorite storybook Bibles called the Children of God Storybook Bible. It's by Archbishop Desmond Tutu. I'm kind of a fangirl of him. I adore that man. But anyway, so I want to read the story of Daniel in the lion's den for us from this book. Yes. So it says that Daniel lived in exile in the kingdom of Persia, but he loved God and prayed to him 3 times every day. Daniel's prayers made him wise, so the king trusted him and asked for his advice. This made Daniel's enemies jealous. They tricked the king into making a law that forced everyone to pray only to the king and not to God. But that night, while Daniel was praying, his enemies spied on him. They ran breathlessly to the king. Daniel prayed to his God and not to you, they said. Arrest him. The king was very sad because he loved Daniel, but the king had to obey his own law. They arrested Daniel and threw him into the den where the lions were kept. The lions paced back and forth, grumbling and growling and very hungry. May your God save you, the king said as a tear fell from his eye. Daniel prayed, and God closed the mouths of the lions. At daybreak, the king hurried to the den. Daniel, Daniel, he called, are you alive? I am alive. My God has saved me, Daniel replied. The king was amazed that Daniel's God kept him safe and commanded everyone in his kingdom to worship God.
Oh my.
Yeah, this is currently one of Zach's favorite stories because he wants to hang out with lions.
Yeah, I have at it. Of course, the phrase from that is wondering where the lions are, or the image of being thrown to the lions. It's interesting, as you read that, I always assumed the story of Daniel was when the Babylonians were in charge, because the Persians come and destroy the Babylonian Empire. It says during the time of the Persian, but I always thought that the story of Daniel is in the heart of the exile. And the metaphor for it, of course, is the people of Israel have been hauled away into captivity. Jerusalem is destroyed. They're now living in the deserts of Babylon. And of course, the image of the lion's den is a metaphor for all of Israel's feeling and experience of being held captive. There's a connection, of course, with that famous Psalm, I think it's 137, where the captives are mocking the people of Israel as they're singing their songs of Zion. We hung up our lyres there on our instruments, on the trees, on the willows. And how can we sing the songs of Zion when we're in a foreign land? Whether it's exactly during the Persian reign or the Babylonian reign, I'm not exactly certain of that. But what we do see is an entire community of people crying out for release, Advent, crying out for a new day, and lost with every aspect of what they understood to be the norms of where God is found in the temple. Now we're out here in the desert. It feels like that.
Yeah, I think this summer once you mentioned that our parking lot worship felt a little bit like exile. Just because we were so accustomed to our worship in the sanctuary, and now we are forced to worship in sort of a foreign location. And how that we're kind of going to get back to that metaphor when we're closed down here in a couple weeks.
Absolutely. And so the story of Daniel is, it's not just a story of Israel's frustration with, being in exile. There's also a place in this story where it is saying, when there is power in this world, like this is another king, like last week with Jeremiah, where these kings in these monarchies are just absolutely tempted to become abusive, narcissistic people that they have no sense of the community around them, and so they just gather wealth and power for themselves. Even King David had all of those temptations. Well, here's another king, a foreign king, who is creating rules and laws, and Daniel in this is he's kind of a conscientious objector to injustice that's going on. And, of course, the answer to those who are conniving against him is make up a story or a catch-22, and now he gets thrown into the lion's cage. And, of course, the story there is God intervenes, and you can see Daniel like, they're going to just rip this Daniel apart, the lions are, and suddenly he's like playing with them and petting them, and it's like, it's a fabulous children's story.
It is. Yeah, I think it's so interesting, the idea that he has a law that you can only pray to me. Like how, we've been talking about narcissism all these weeks. How narcissistic can you be? You have to pray to me and not to God.
Which is why I think the psalmist writes, Psalm 117, do not put your trust in rulers. Do not put your trust, he says it twice in that psalm. Do not put your trust in flesh. Do not put your trust in rulers. Again, find your ultimate trust in the God of life. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have respect and hope that our systems of government won't have checks and balances, and leaders who get into positions of authority who really have a heart for the common good of people. If they somehow slide into these kinds of situations, the people suffer. Down the ranks, people suffer at the lowest level, the medium levels. So,
right. One of the things I was really struck by in your sermon this last Sunday was the comparison between sort of abstract philosophical and theological concepts, like love your neighbor, those sorts of things that we cling to, and making them very alive in your life. And I feel like we have another example of this here because many of us in this country, we've never had the experience of we have to choose either our faith or we're going to get eaten by lions. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like we've experienced no real consequences. Like, we've never experienced this type of persecution that, say, the Jewish people living in diaspora or in exile have. And I feel like, to us, persecution really is an abstract sort of concept. Like, I know I've never felt like there's this level of consequence for following Christ or living out faith in my life.
Wow, that's good. One of the illustrations I used on Sunday from the Jeremiah story is the struggle that all of us have to go from a concept, especially in a world in which there's so much contrary information given, and that's what's going on in this story. Well, there's this, and then there's this, and then, the king is caught saying, well, I have to obey my own rules, follow through with it. It's really difficult to go from information you get to really owning it and believing it. Right. Everybody has to go through these steps. You process it, think through it, this might be true. And so the connection of learning that in our life, that the commands of love your neighbor get somehow in our heart, not waiting until it's personal. And so when I heard the governor speak about the closing down of businesses, he had to begin in high school sports. He had to begin by making it personal and by saying, my whole life has been about sports. This hurts me as much as trying to giving value to it because this is my experience. COVID becomes more and more real for us when somebody finally, who's been denying that it's a real problem, until it finally comes home. They know somebody. So it's even more real for me right now. I haven't shared with you this, that my brother got COVID. Got it from his wife, who was a teacher in the school, because one of the teachers in that school went to a wedding in Wisconsin, came back, gave it to 18 different teachers. One of them was my sister-in-law, of course. She didn't know, brought it home to her husband, my brother. He was back in the hospital again now this last week for 3 or 4 days, and traced it back to an immune issue, traced right back to COVID. So he's got a condition that he's going to be living with for the rest of his life that will certainly make his life constantly more difficult and probably shorten it. Well, now it's like, why didn't that person listen? And then I have to once again say, we're all in this same boat it's hard to intellectualize something, but then when it becomes personal, you become pretty self-righteous and say, all of you people should have acted like, and then I think of all the times I didn't wear a mask early on, right, or questioned it early on. This is all to say the next 3 or 4 months, this is real stuff. People are dying. Many people are dying. And we are going to be going back this Sunday at Glen Carey. Will be our last Sunday in-house worship. And then we'll go back online, probably until a vaccine makes its way into our lives, into our culture, which might be maybe the spring, March or April, that we as a culture might be on the other side of again. So our conversation has come full circle. Yeah. What are you thankful for? And we both talked about a time when this is done. There is some light now at the end of the tunnel. I think we're in inning 5 of a 9-inning game, which means the 6th and 7th innings, which oftentimes determine a baseball game, are going to be the next 2 or 3 months, and then hopefully sometime this spring and fall.
Well, and this is our message of Advent, and our message from Daniel even, that while we're waiting, while we're in exile or in the lion's den or in whatever we're facing, we wait with expectant hope for a new type of future where God's reign will prove victorious over the forces of sin and death and evil. And whether that's Christmas or, in 100 million years from now, or, in April when the vaccine comes out, whatever it is, we have to live with hope, knowing that God is with us in the way that God was with Daniel when he was in the lion's den.
Can I give you a movie recommendation?
Is it going to be a bad old movie?
Oh, it's so Catherine and I watched it last night. It's an old movie from 10 years ago or so. The Best Marigold Hotel. Have you seen it?
Never heard of it.
Oh man, I'll just give you a little summary of it. It's in India, this owner of a hotel, which is in rough shape, puts out a really nice brochure for a retirement community for people, so like 7 or 8 people from the United States. One person goes to India to get hip surgery. Maggie Smith plays her. She's from Downtown Abbey.
Yeah, she's amazing.
She's great, and she's fabulous in this movie. Anyway, so they show up in India, and this hotel is not what they expected. And it's really a story of how this 7 or 8 random people have to find, or do or don't find meaning in not the best circumstances of their life. And it's got that British humor where people have great one-liners that make you burst out. And so in the end, it's hope-filled. One of the key actors in it had been a judge, and you find he's going back with this, not to retire there, but he's actually going to die. You don't find that out until later. But when he was a young man, he fell in love with another man from India, and he's been waiting his whole life to go back and find this person who it's been 50 years since they've been separated, and they finally meet, and it's really sweet stuff. And so anyway, my recommendation, not to say, have we ever recommended movies here yet?
I mean, that would be a nice addition to our midweek thing.
Let's do it. You come up with one next week, that I came up with one this week.
All right, I can do that.
And we'll keep working on my stepson and your sister and see where that goes.
Oh, jeez.
You all have a great Advent. We'll see you this Sunday in worship. If you can, come and worship with us one last time before we go into lockdown again. Thanks to Len Cushing for being here all the time to help videotape us here and on Sunday mornings. He'll be a part of recording our worship services midweek, starting, I guess, next week. And so I'm going to ask you all specifically to be involved with our worship still. Don't find yourself floating away and not being connected. Stay connected with your faith community. For members of this church, stay connected with us here at Glen Cary Lutheran Church. For Daniel, for Kristina, for Pastor Gary, for Len, for all of us, see us Sunday or soon.